Hi. In this video we'll take a look at the different effects that the add-on Animax offers. Let's get started. I'm using the version 1.5 of the add-on along with Blender 2.92. We will use this fraction text to demonstrate the effects. Okay, the first effects in our list is the transformer effect. It looks like a robotic movements, hence the name. In this effect we have the distance parameter, which is basically the maximum distance the objects will travel. In my experience, a short duration works best for this effect, and also a small distance. With the sum camera shack and the right sound effects, you will get a real cool animation. The random seed is for changing the randomized pattern. And finally, the push away parameter. We will explain it later with the custom effect. Next, the shooting effect. We will use the glowing Suzanne to demonstrate the effect. While selected, press the eyedropper to set it as an emitter. When playing the animation, you can see the glowing object is emitting the objects. The interpolation is linear by default. You can choose one of the available easing functions to make the animation look more interesting. You can randomize the motion of the object using the add noise parameter. The noise frequency is to control the degree of randomness. Next, the explode effect. As the name suggests, it explodes the objects. From my experience, it works best from a low duration offset and with a lot of rotation. We have two main parameters, the velocity and the gravity. For example, if I increase the velocity in the x-axis, the object travels more distance in the x direction, and the same is true for all the directions. If we set them to 0, the objects will fall down, because the only force left is gravity. The button next to the axis is for randomizing the movement. If disabled, the objects will move in the same direction. And the last parameter is up axis. From there you can set the direction of gravity. Next, the spark effect. This is how it looks. There are two movements, a horizontal random movement and a straight vertical movement. You can play with the values to have different variations. We can also change the rotation. We can change the degree of randomness. The Spark 2 is pretty much the same, except it's less random. Next, the streak effect. In this effect, the objects will look like streaks. We don't have a lot of parameters in this one. We can just change the length of the streak and then random seed. Next is the popcorn effect. This is how it looks. We can control the distance and the rotation and the scale. Next, the butterfly effects. This is one of my personal favorites. It looks best with long duration. We can control the distance and the vibration of objects. and the angle of vibration. Next, the smooth effect. It looks like the butterfly effect, except the objects don't vibrate. In this effect, we can control the distance and the rotation. The Smooth 2 effect is like the previous one, except the movement is more random. You can control the degree of randomness with the parameter number of turns. Next, the spiral effect. In this effect, the object moves in circles, which looks like a spiral. We can control the distance, and we can increase the complexity by increasing the parameter number of turns. We can also offset the position of the objects to minimize the intersection. And finally, we can change the rotation axis by changing the up axis. We can even make it random. Next, the wiggle effect. It's a smooth effect, except the movement is more random. Actually, we have two layers of randomness. Complexity is the first layer, and distortion is the second one. If we set the complexity to a low value and the distortion to a high value, we will have this Cole effect. Next, the zigzag effect. It's another random movement effect, nothing special about it. Next, the rain effect. This effect works best with random direction and short duration per object. Drop lengths. Acts like a fake motion blur. Next is the elastic effect. By default, it doesn't look interesting at all. So first we set the initial scale to 1, so that the scale doesn't change over time. Then I change the location and now it looks more interesting. We can change the degree of elasticity. And we can make the animation slow down quickly. These parameters work the same in both the rotation and the scale. Next, the collapse effect. In this effect, the objects are disturbed on a surface. You control the placement by changing the floor parameter. You can also control the spread of the object. You can add some rotation to make the animation more interesting. The up axis is to control the orientation of the floor. You can make the object start invisibly using the parameter fade out. Next, the copy animation effect. I will start by animating this empty. Notice that the last keyframe is in the center, and all the transform are cleared, to have a predictable animation. With the empty selected, I will click on the eyedropper to set it as a source of animation. You can see that all the objects copy the animation from the empty. You can add an F-curve modifier and the animation will still work. The local rotation parameter, we will explain it later with the custom effect. Next, the follow curve effect. In this effect, all the objects follow the trajectory of a curve. I will add a curve, then in the edit mode I will try to give it an S shape. If we play the animation, it will look blocky. Increasing the resolution on the curve will solve this problem. Something important to note is that the objects will follow the direction of the curve. To see the direction of the curve in edit mode, go to the overlays and enable the normals. To invert the direction, go to segments and then choose switch direction. You can change the scale of the curve using the scale parameter. You can also introduce some random rotation. And for the random movement, use the parameter add noise. It works like in the shoot effect. This effect in the demo was done using this effect. One last thing to note is that all manipulation in object mode is ignored by the add-on. So if you want to manipulate the curve, do it in edit mode. The last effect is a custom effect. In this effect we have a good control over the location, rotation, and scale of the objects. Let's start with the first section, which is in the presets. In this mode you can save and load your custom presets. To load a preset, press this button. So we loaded the crystal preset. To rename the preset, press the button with the pen icon, then enter the new name, then press OK. To delete the preset, use the X button. And to save a new preset, just type the name, then press the button next to it. To go back to the default values, just select the preset name, default, then load it. You can study these presets to understand how they were made. For example, this effect looked like a dissolving pile. This is another one. Next section is the location. Here we can set the initial position of the objects. We can also choose one of the different easing functions. And we can randomize the location. This minus button is for including negative values. So in this case we transform the randomization range from 0 to 2. To the range -2 to 2. And the plus button is to add the initial location to the random location. To demonstrate the push away option, I used a default cube, subdivided it, then applied the modifier. Then separated the faces. Then I will add an empty that will serve as a push object. Now if I change the location, you can see how the objects move. Compared to when they moved when disabled. The empty serves as a new origin for the objects. And we have almost the same options in the rotation and scale. One last thing that is worth examining is the local rotation. If enabled, the objects will rotate around their local axis instead of the global axis. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching.